So today's reading from Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. And the Master's speaking here. And he says, when asked, "Who are you?" you place your hand on the right side of the breast and say, "I am." There you involuntarily point out the self. The self is thus known. But the individual is miserable because he confounds the mind and body with the self. This confusion is due to wrong knowledge. Elimination of wrong knowledge is alone needed. Such elimination results in realization. The questioner asks, but how to control the mind? The Maharshi says, what is mind? Whose is the mind? Questioner says, mind always wanders, and I cannot control it. The Maharshi says, it's in the nature of the mind to wander. You are not the mind. The mind springs up and then sinks down. It is impermanent, transitory, whereas you are eternal. There is nothing but the self. To remain as the self is the thing. Never mind the mind. If its source is sought, it will vanish, leaving the self unaffected. The questioner says, so one need not seek to control the mind? The Maharshi says, there is no mind to control if you realize the self. The mind vanishing, the self shines forth as inner light. In the realized man, the mind may be active or inactive. The self alone remains. For the mind, the body, and the world are not separate from the self. They rise from and sink into the self. They do not remain apart from the self. Can they be different from the self? Only be aware of the self. Why worry about these shadows? How do they affect the self? He further explained, the self is the heart. The heart is self-luminous. Light arises from the heart and reaches the brain, which is the seat of the mind. The world is seen with the mind, that is, by the reflected light of the self. And it is perceived with the aid of the mind. When the mind is illumined, it is aware of the world. When it is not itself so illumined, it is not aware of the world. If the mind is turned in towards the source of light, objective knowledge ceases, and self alone shines forth as the heart. The moon shines by the reflected light of the sun. When the sun has set, the moon is useful for revealing objects. When the sun has risen, no one needs the moon, although the pale disk of the moon is still visible in the sky. So it is with the mind and the heart. The mind is useful because of its reflected light. It is used for seeing objects. When it is turned inwards, the source of illumination shines forth by itself, and the mind remains dim and useless like the moon in daylight. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome to Satsang. So in this reading today, once again, Sri Ramana is pointing us past the mind to the heart of being, to your own self-luminous nature. For all of us, when we take up spiritual life or take up spiritual endeavor, the hardest thing, the hardest challenge for us is to step beyond the mind. Part of the reason for this is because we're still identified with what's happening in the mind. And the impulse to awaken, though genuine and true, is still flowing through the mind itself. And so this can lead us to say, oh, my life as I'm living it isn't really working for me. Or my spiritual practice or my spiritual discipline or my religious upbringing doesn't seem to be working for me much anymore. And so we start to seek, we begin looking. Is there something else, is the question that rises in us. We see the limitation of the life we've been living, and we ask that question, is there something else? Is there something else I can look toward? But of course, because our habit up till this point has been to try to find things in the world, in the mind, ways of satisfaction, ways to happiness, ways to enjoy, ways to get away from the things that we don't enjoy and we don't want anymore. We've been doing that for a long time with the mind, and we become conditioned to look to the mind itself as the source of happiness. And of course, in one way, from a Vedanta standpoint, this is actually the right path. It's the path of looking toward the mind. But what happens initially is we look at the mind again. So we move from one box to another box. We say, oh, that way of life wasn't working. I don't like that. I'm going to put that box away and I'm going to move over here. And now I'm going to put that person down and I'm going to pick up this person. Or I'm going to put down that religion and I'm going to pick up this religion. Or I've been in this kind of training and now I'm going to go to that kind of training. And of course, the inevitable result of that is that we feel as though we fail again, either in a short time or a long time. Sometimes we can spend many, many years, decades, in a spiritual practice that we took up because we were seeking to get out of our old life and we wanted a new life. And so we move into a new spiritual practice, a new religion. We move from being a Christian to being a Buddhist, from being a Buddhist to being a Hindu, from being a Hindu to being a Vedantin, from Zen to Tibetan, from Catholicism to evangelicalism. We just keep moving around in this way. Always the impulse is true. The impulse is to awaken more, to know God in a way that we have not to this moment. So the impulse itself is correct. The object that we choose is not, because we continue to look in the mind for satisfaction in this life. So what Sri Ramana is pointing out here is is that it becomes necessary for us at some point to stop looking at the mind itself, to look at what is beyond the mind, or even one can say what is before the mind. In order to do this, we have to take up a basic kind of simplicity in our life. The reason we need to do this is because the mind is a complex vehicle, right? And we already know as we take up spiritual life that this complex vehicle is not yielding satisfaction. We know this. But, as I pointed out, typically what we do is just move to a new set of objects and hope to find satisfaction in there. And this is doomed to fail in the same way that our original intention failed, because we were looking at the objects in the mind, finding no happiness and no satisfaction. We decided to move on. But very few of the spiritual traditions actually point to the fact that the way to penetrate through mind is not to pick up a new set of objects, but rather to come to the simplicity of what is in this moment, what is here already for you. And by that I don't mean the way you live, who your partner is, what your religion is, who you think you are. All of these things have to be set down. So one of the most challenging things for practitioners, for seekers, is to come to the place where they realize that what's necessary is in some way they have to begin the process of unmasking themselves. And this is terrifying. Each and every one of us throughout our lifetime, we grow up, we become the person we are, and then as we gain more and more knowledge about who we want the world to believe us to be, we begin to put on a mask, and day by day we create this mask for ourselves, so that each time we move out into the world, each time we step away from our own recognition of who I am inside, we actually don't present an authentic self to the world. We have a mask that we wear. It's a combination of things we believe about ourselves and things that we perceive others believe about us over the course of a lifetime. So we put this mask on, and then as we begin, we leave home, we lock the door, and we turn around and we put the mask on because now we're going out the gate. And we walk around in the world with this mask on, projecting an image that is self-thought and self-acquired, and that we hope, desperate beyond desperate, that everyone that we meet is going to see this mask that we're holding up in front of our face. And of course we are undone by the world most of the time. But once we step into spiritual life, once we say, this is the most important thing for me, whatever else is happening in the world, no matter who I'm married to, no matter what my health is like, no matter whether I have a good job or no job, I'm going to just move through the world as my authentic self. We have to begin this process of unmasking. And this is what spiritual life is about. The reason is, you can't come to know who you are if you keep applying this mask of the mind to your own face and believing that's who you are. It's enough that you've tried to get the whole world to believe a story about who you are. Now becomes necessary for you to see the mask which you've made for yourself or accepted about yourself and begin to unmask yourself. And this is a terrifying step for people. To be able to walk through the world as your authentic self is a difficult thing. More difficult is to admit to yourself that you are not who you thought you have been all of your life. That you might be something else. Someone else. Not really a someone else. Right? Because if I say to you, as I have to many of you, if I ask you, are you aware? You can't hold your mask up and say, well, don't ask me that question. I want you to look here. Look at this mask. And this is what I want you to see, right? Because if I say to you simply, are you aware? Your immediate reply in this moment is yes, I'm aware. I know that I'm here. But in truth, this is the only thing you know. Everything else is a projection of your mask. But you know that you are here. And you know that in this moment, you are aware. So if you begin the process of stripping back everything to this fundamental and essential awareness or consciousness which you are, you have to drop this mask, not only to the world, but also to yourself. How do you do this? By asking this question, who am I? Or what am I? Or am I aware? If you meet every self-projection you have, in other words, if everything you believe about yourself, every time a thought that corresponds to that belief system, this is who I am, this is where I'm from, this is who I'm married to, this is what I do, if every time you meet a self-descriptive attempt by the mind to tell you who you are, if you say, wait, who's this I that I'm referring to? You challenge the mask which you've given yourself and the world has given you over your lifetime. And each and every time you do that, you become more and more aware of who you are without the mask, of who you are when you are simply here and aware and not projecting anything. When this projection of a false me starts to subside, your life becomes simpler, simpler and simpler. And so one of the ways that we can speed up this process and get ourselves through the fear of knowing who we are is to allow our lives to become simpler, to volunteer for the unmasking. Mind has, as its own nature, the tendency towards proliferation. It tends to want to add to. The result of that, for some of us, some of you will know this person, is that we remain constantly busy. And if we're not busy, we turn on the TV. If we don't have a TV, we turn on our phone so we can listen to music. If we're not in a place where we can listen to music, we just have to stare at our screen. This is the outward attempt to constantly remain busy. Do you know this one? This one who is a human doing, not a human being, but a human doing? You know this person? Are you familiar with this person? This person wakes up in the morning and from that moment tries to plan out the filling of every moment all the way through the day until I'm so absolutely exhausted I can't do anything but fall asleep again. This is a human doing. And some of you are familiar with this person. Referred to often as a type A personality, and many of us in this room are coming out of that space. Some are still in that space, others have moved beyond it. But one of the things that happens as soon as we begin to inquire, who am I? Who is this one who is staying so busy all the time, who can't be alone for 5 minutes without, bouncing off of someone or something, a screen or a person or an activity? Who is this one that's constantly being supported? What is the nature of this mask? As soon as we start asking these kinds of questions, one of the things we notice right away is that because we ask the question, who am I? What am I? Am I aware in this moment? that proliferation that happens in the mind, which drives us out into the world and out into activity, begins to slow down. So there's a natural simplicity that begins to happen. This is the next level of terror if you are a human doing. Simplicity is not really your thing. Not something you really want. But your heart of hearts is really craving it, and usually you know it. The way you know it is because as soon as your life begins to slow down a little bit, as soon as the desire to express outwardly begins to slow down a little bit, you say, oh, there's a problem, but you think the problem is what you were doing before isn't working in some way, so now you have to pick up a whole bunch of new activity, a new bunch of doing, new people in your life, a new job, a new home. You have to buy something, you have to move, you have to disrupt everything that you did before because that obviously wasn't working, because now you're just here in this simplicity and you're bored. You know this mind that does this and then drives you out into the next activity? But once you've made this decision, as all of you have sitting here, once you've made this decision, I'm going to look beyond the mind. And someone has given you this guidance. Look beyond the mind by asking, who are you? What are you? By noticing in this moment you are aware. Nothing else, not what you're aware of, just that you are aware. You are here. You have this experience. You can perceive it directly. I am here in this moment. I know that I am aware. I know that I'm here. You ask these questions, you keep coming back to this, and the process of dropping beyond the mind into presence, into the recognition that you are not what the mind is, begins to ripen. And it ripens through simplicity. And it begins the process of voluntarily unmasking who you think you are, who you have accepted you are, the projections you've accepted from other people, and the conclusions you've come to in your own mind. One of the most difficult things to do in this penetration of the mind into spirit itself, into the illumination of your own heart, one of the most difficult things to overcome is this tendency to keep looking in the mind for a definition of who I am. Either one that I self-assumed, or one that was placed on me as a child, or placed on me through various kinds of relationships I have as an adult. We come to penetrate through that fog, if you will. In Vedanta, we call it veiling. This is the veiling quality of the mind. It tells us that that which is illusory or transitory or not permanent, impermanent, is real. So we say, no, this is not real. I know this isn't real. What my mind is saying to me is the source of the difficulty, not the solution. So it doesn't matter if I move from one set of beliefs in the mind to another set of beliefs in the mind. So before I was a failed Christian, now my attempt is I'm going to become a perfect Buddhist. Right? This is another set of thoughts about what is right, what I need to be. Well, I did that for 10 years and that didn't really solve the situation for me, so maybe I'll become the perfect Vedantan, or I'll become the perfect Hindu, or I'll become the perfect something else, you name it, whatever it is for you. I use these religious terms because they are my experience. So I can speak about them directly, moving from one spiritual system, one belief system to another. Always using the mind to try to understand who am I. Until my master said to me, no, ask the question directly, who are you? And then your fascination with jumping from one box to another box to another box will just fall away on its own. And this was true. So some of you are dealing with this kind of pathway where you're here exploring something new or different, having become dissatisfied, unsatisfied with your spiritual life up till now. You've looked at several different paths and now you'll check out this one. But this one will bring it to an end for you. If you come to the question, who? Not what. What is in the mind? Who is the direct perception? I am here. Well, once you understand completely that you are here, and you ask the question, who? The me-ness of your experience just begins to dissolve. And some of you are having this experience. The me-ness, which you've held on to so tenaciously throughout your lifetime, is beginning to let go. You know this because your life starts to become simpler. You're less willing to fill your life with busyness. That doesn't mean you don't act or you have to reject life. It just means that you realize that staying busy from the moment you wake up in the morning until you drop off to sleep exhaustedly at night is not the solution. That in fact the solution may lie in allowing there to be some space throughout your day in which you can just drop the me for a moment. You can just be yourself. Feel the wind in your hair, the sun on your face, your feet on the ground, like this. Become aware that you are here. In order to do this, you have to be willing to let your life simplify. It won't be enough to change your life outwardly and then fill all the minutes of the day with whatever your new outlook is. That won't be enough. If what you're looking for is to understand who you are, to know yourself as spiritual, as spirit itself, to know yourself as awareness, as being, consciousness and bliss, you will need to allow simplicity to happen. And of course you can assist it. You cannot make so many appointments in one day, not fill your life so continuously with activity. Rather, begin to allow there to be space for this exploration. So maybe for you, at this moment, the life you're living, you have to pencil that space in. You may have to go to your calendar and you may have to say, at 3 o'clock, do nothing, and leave that space there for an hour or two. If you can do this for 15 minutes or a half an hour throughout your day, you'll begin to get the idea about what it means to live more simply and to see then, what does life bring me? Not what do I demand of life through all my busyness and activity, but what is brought to me, what comes to me naturally. Because partly what happens is you begin to recognize that what's coming at you throughout your experience, if you let the mind subside, is the life you were looking for anyway. You just didn't know you had to drop the mind, all the busyness, all the activity, and all the thinking that was happening, at least for a few minutes, to allow life itself to show up. Stop avoiding your own being, your own life, by keeping yourself so busy and so engaged, even though it might be good. You might be saving the world in some way, you know. You might be politically active, whatever it is for you. You don't have to drop the things you enjoy, but you need to create some space in them for the simplicity of your own being, for your own experience of yourself as beingness, consciousness, and bliss, to manifest fully, moment by moment, throughout your days. And then slowly what will happen, like exercising, you will become stronger in your ability to just rest here, now, as the illumined self, even as you're in the world. Now whatever work you do in the world, whoever you engage with, whatever activity you're involved with, becomes the work of life itself. It doesn't even belong to you, and you don't have to own it. It's all okay. You can just be relaxed. Let life do what it wants with you. Let it unfold. in the way that it destined you to unfold it anyway when you were born, and you didn't realize, you forgot. As you grew into the man or woman that you are today. So now ask the question, who am I if I unmask myself in this moment and I am just here? I don't need to be anyone. Now what? I don't need to project anything at all. Now what? Who are you? You are the self, that which is aware, eternal, unborn, undying, the self, the heart of being, consciousness and bliss. You are whole, complete. Nothing else is necessary. Remain as you are. Let everything else go. Do it now.
Put it on your to-do list.
Is there something you want to say? Okay.
So, can we answer that question of who I am with I am a perfect child of God? Or is that still the mind?
The only answer that's true to the question, who am I, is silence. Your statement, I am a perfect child of God, you can say is a useful tool on the way to that silence. But I would encourage you not to even need to take that step. If you do need to take that step, do it. But understand, it's a step. It's not that, it's a step on the journey. And the reason is, there are so many concepts in there. I am. Perfect. Child. God. You see all the concepts that are in there? And so this is the indicator that this is still trying to unmask the mind using the mind. This is not wrong, right? In Vedanta or in Ramana's teaching, it's often said along the way to silence, right, we can use a thorn to remove the thorn. Right? So, if in this conversation today I'm saying to you, the thorn is the mind, then it is possible to use a thorn to remove the thorn of mind by using another set of better concepts like I am, perfect, child, and God. You can use those concepts. Those are much better, right, than I am, whatever the story is that your mind is telling you about your inadequacies, your lack, what a horrible person you are, right? If you have those kinds of stories going on, then you can use this other kind of pointer just to bring yourself out of this negative state of thinking and put yourself into a more positive place of thinking. So yes, this can be helpful. But that won't get you to the place where you respond directly to my indication when I said, do it now. Because this do it now indicates the dropping completely of all conceptual thinking in the mind, and which is only there. Understand, it can be there useful, like you say, but if it's there, it is masking the heart itself. It's masking self-luminous nature. Why? Because even the concept I, or I am a child of God, is still something that's running through the mind. And what we're wanting to do here is to get that mind, which tends to look only at itself, to drop into the heart of being and recognize that its self-luminous nature, that which enables us to see the thoughts in the mind, the concepts in the mind, that which is able to say, I am a perfect child of God, is before that. Right? What you know, if I say to you, are you here, is you say yes. You know because you have an I am nature. So that I am nature is obvious to all of us. Even before we frame it in some way with the mind, even with a statement like, I am a perfect child of God. This still requires accepting in some way the validity of mind. Now, I'm not saying mind does not have any validity. If you need to do your shopping list and you need to do your tax returns, mind is capable of doing that. So, mind has its place. It has a validity. Just not in this conversation. If what you're interested is knowing in who you are, and knowing it with beyond a shadow of a doubt, then you have to turn away from what mind is saying. Whether it's describing you as the worst person in the world or the perfect child of God, it's still wanting you to play its game. What is before that? What makes that conversation, either of those conversations, possible in your own mind? I am a horrible person, or I am a perfect child of God. What makes that possible? That's what's being pointed at here. Now, of course, if you're really tangled in something, you have some belief system, there's something is going on in your life that's really got you wrapped up in distracted, and you can't calm the mind at all, then yeah, give it something to chew on like that. This will benefit you and everyone around you. Right? Will stop you from trying to control everyone around you in order to get your own mind to quiet down. Right? Some of you are familiar with this, how how this works, that when your own mind is crazy, the thing you try to do is control everybody around you. Right? Oh, well, not, everybody's laughing, so you all know this. Huh? Control all the outer circumstances, all the people, and then I'll be safe. Then I'll be okay. What would it be like for you if you didn't need to control anything in your life? What if you could just relax? That whole part of your being that needs to control everything and everyone around you. What would your life be like? If you didn't need to be the boss. Would you still feel safe? Some of you were here last week when I talked about radical trust. This is what I'm pointing at once again. Radical trust is to see everything as God, everything as the divine. And this leads to a deep sense of relaxation, that everything is fine, all is well. Robert Adams used to say all the time, all is well. One of my primary teachers used to say, all is well. Don't worry, don't fret, let things be as they are. Over time you learn that you can really deeply relax into this. And of course this is also the true meaning of surrender in all of the spiritual traditions, whether Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, doesn't matter. All the world's religions talk about surrender. And what surrender really means is trust. Trust life itself. Trust the divine.
I have a question. In this journey of surrendering and letting go of things, in the past 2 years, I've let go about, let's say, 70% of my stuff. And I know I still have 30 more percent to let go of. But in the
Are we
meantime,
talking about physical stuff or emotional
it
stuff
feels-
or all stuff?
It feels like both.
Okay.
And just recently, I was faced with maybe my husband dying from his surgery, and me having to deal about him leaving his life suit behind, and then how do I be without his life suit around my life suit? For putting it in abstracts. And when we got home, everything was pretty much the same, except for I'm thinking, I think my computer and my healing machine that I have plugs in has been stolen completely. Nowhere in the house at all. And so I'm thinking, okay, what does the computer represent to me? Like all my stories, all the stories I've ever put in there. And what does that healing thing represent, that the healing's from the outside? So I'm kind of rejoicing in that they've been stolen.
And you've been freed up from all that.
Yeah. So now I don't have to purposely try to get rid of that. It's already gone. So I'm thinking that the universe is already clearing my stuff for me.
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
I didn't have the choice of
Yeah.
doing it right yet.
Right.
I must have unconsciously had the choice to do that.
Yeah.
So now I'm 2 less stories, maybe, of those millions of stories that I've been making of myself.
Yeah, and when I'm talking about voluntary simplicity, this happens on every level. So if you weren't ready to get rid of those things and the universe took care of that and you can accept that, beautiful. That's the accept that simplicity that's happening anyway. But I'm not really talking about possessions. I'm going to be really clear about that. Or people, or jobs, or not really talking about that. The simplicity that needs to happen is the simplicity that comes from the very complex picture that I hold of myself and I present to the world. And letting the simplification of who am I in my essential being, essential nature happen. And so I'm talking about the simplification that comes when we voluntarily unmask ourselves by saying, I'm not that. Whatever it is that's going on in my life, whatever's going on in my mind, I'm not that. So it's a letting go of identification with myself as anything other than the divine or anything other than life itself. That's the main simplicity that needs to happen. And if you begin to undertake that as a way of being in the world, as much as you possibly can to remind yourself, then material things and people who don't belong in your life anymore because they're counter to your own growth or whatever, they will just go. Not with a big boom, not necessarily by having someone break in your house and steal your stuff, but there's just a natural letting go that happens. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is good.
Yeah.
Just remember that even while you're engaging in this process, what's showing up on the screen of awareness is not about the possessions and it's not about people. It's about letting go of identity in possessions and in people. And just letting go of the identification that I am this body and I am the thoughts in this mind and I am the habits that I have and I am what people have told me I am all of my life, and being willing to simply just keep letting go of that and returning to this still, quiet place where you know simply and directly, I exist. And then see what comes. See, coming to this moment where you understand that you exist completely, wholly, and solely in this moment is only about seeing what life is going to bring you on its own. This is radical trust. And knowing that whatever is brought to you is divine will. Not my will, the will of life itself is coming to you in this moment. Before we do this, we can't really see, right? Something comes, an experience comes, we have a health issue, or someone we know has a health issue, or something happens in our relationships, or someone passes on, or we lose a job, or we lose a bunch of money in the stock market. Someone breaks into our house and steals our stuff. Before then, we cannot tell what was necessary and good in this. Once we come to the position I am here, I exist, and we just wait there in our own silence, we begin to see, yes, everything that's coming is absolutely just right. Even I'm suffering from ill health at the moment, or nursing someone else who's in ill health, in the case of maybe your husband. We just begin to settle in and relax in life itself and let life guide us into what it wants for us. Knowing that what life will bring us is actually what we wanted in the long run anyway, we just didn't know it. Yeah, once we start to live this way, we begin to see, I didn't know that this was the life I wanted, but I'm so happy to have it. I don't need to search for it anymore, and I'm not seeking anything. Life is just fine as it is. This takes great courage, doesn't it?
Yes.
Some of you know. I'm not talking about something that's easily done.
Isn't that called letting go of attachments?
Sure. Understand, if we talk about letting go of attachments, that by attachments, however, I mean both that which we're grasping at and holding and wanting to keep, and that which we're trying to push away. right? Because when we talk about attachments, most of the time we only think of one half of that equation, which is I am attached to a person, someone I want to stay in my life. I'm attached to some situation. I'm attached to bliss in the mind, and I want to have that bliss all the time. And we don't realize that there's also attachment when we're trying to get rid of somebody in our life, or we're trying to get rid of a way that we think in the mind. We're never able to push something away until after we've grasped it. So the attachment can occur in the dark. It can remain hidden in the mind. So understand that if we're talking about attachment, we're talking about both sides of the equation for attachment. Both those things we want to keep and those things we want to get rid of. We're attached either way. There is an I that's struggling and suffering with either wanting something or wanting to get rid of something. And what we're talking about here is moving beyond the dualities, all the dualities. Moving beyond attachment and non-attachment. All the concepts in mind, even the highest, veil the truth of your own nature, that you are being, consciousness. So you can't even be attached or unattached to the recognition that you are being, consciousness. Because these are concepts, right? We have to use words to communicate in this environment. But true being is beyond all that communication, and that's why I started by pointing to the recognition that what remains only remains as silence. Cannot be fathomed by the mind. Cannot be found by the mind. Can only be veiled, blocked, hidden, and undermined by the mind.
So the question, who am I?
Yes.
Well, as imperfect as I am the temple of God. I choose to do what I, sometimes right, sometimes wrong,
Yes.
but I'm still that little bit part of Him that He gave me the soul that I think goes back to Him when I die. So I'm part of Him. And
Or maybe all of him.
yeah. And, this is like you say, just the present, and this is what we perceive. When we go, I had a out-of-body experience, and I had a beautiful light that opened up, and I was going up to it, and finally I came down, and I've never been afraid to die, but after that, it just, the light was so beautiful that it was actually like seeing, God, and there's no fear of anything.
Beautiful. So still ask the question, who am I though?
Oh yeah.
Because these are all experiences.
Well,
They're beautiful experiences,
yeah.
right? And I thank you for sharing them with us.
Well, a lot of it's, who is He? A while
Yes.
ago when
Yes.
we were meditating,
Who is
the
it?
wind was coming,
Yes.
He was talking to us,
Yes.
it's Him, it's nature.
Yes.
And
It's everything.
I'm a
yes.
Christian, and I've been through some different, religions, but there's no religion that's going to save us. It's what we do, I think,
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but it's an amazing
Beautiful.
thing, just nature. I see nature as God.
And just to be here.
Everything's there, yeah.
Yes. And just to be here. This is the greatest grace, is just to realize I am here.
Right.
And I'm not afraid. This is a life of grace. Yeah.
question about the body.
Whose body?
My body. The
Whose-
body.
Okay.
You said that you can't discover it, not that it's an it, with the mind. The mind can only veil it, obscure it. And I'm just wondering about the body. The discovering it through the body or the body veiling it. My experience is that when my mind can drop completely, that feels like a healing experience, like there's like a healing that's happening. Physically, like it's a sensation. And I guess I sort of feel like, okay, my mind can quiet down to nothing, but, you know, my body still hurts. And that isn't, that's the thing that's, I can't get around it.
Can you be in it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, can you really be in it?
It's definitely an attachment that I'm pushing away.
What's the attachment you're pushing away?
The pain, like the, you know, the, when you're talking about trying to organize your life to try to get to a different situation where you don't hurt.
And if you stop pushing against the pain, what happens?
It's still there.
And what does that mean? You say it is still there.
The sensation of pain is still there. The momentum of resisting against it is still there.
Okay, so drop that resistance. What prevents that?
It's just an unconscious habit holding that I just have to continuously
Yes,
be aware and drop.
exactly. See, it is an unconscious habit, so now you need to bring it into consciousness.
I guess that's what I'm asking about, because it's not so much a thought as like a physical habit.
Right.
Like a there is like thoughtless momentum, physical momentum,
Mm-hmm.
and then thoughts too.
But you can't do anything about it in terms of understanding it conceptually. All you can do is meet every moment of it and recognize consciously that the difficulty is there. Can you embrace it? Can you allow it? Can you not resist it? And what would it mean for you if you did that? Can you do it right now?
Yeah, I can do it sometimes.
Well, then you have to strengthen that.
Yeah.
If you know you can do it sometimes, then you have to practice with that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Your default setting is not to practice with the pain. Your default setting is to resist it, to want to get rid of it,
To work to get rid of it.
to work to get rid of it, however you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the default setting. But that doesn't have to be that way. But for it not to be that way, you have to find another default setting. What I'm saying is that this engagement of spiritual life is a constant.
Mm-hmm. It is a constant.
Yes. And what that means, though, is that when you're not sitting here with someone saying to you, yeah, notice that resistance and push it aside. Don't bother with the resistance. It's just there. Let it be there. Don't worry about that. Just be here with the experience. I exist. Now you have to begin to do that. You have to begin to do it throughout your day. Every time you realize that that resistance is present, every time you realize that pain is present, you have to look directly at it without resistance. If you can, even embrace it and say, don't know why you're here, but all right, okay. Teach me whatever it is you want me to know. You know, you can take those kinds of steps. But mostly understand when you begin to identify with the pain and resist it, you have to come away from that. You have to go to a new default setting, which is to let go.
I have lots of opportunities to do that, so I do it pretty often. But
Yeah, what's the but?
the perception is that if I stop working, it hurts more.
Challenge that perception.
How do you know it's not good?
This brings us right back to the question, what am I trying to learn from this? Or what needs to be learned from this? What letting go has to happen? See all these questions around that? The root of the difficulty feels like it's the pain, but the root of the difficulty is the resistance. Because resistance always increases. It doesn't decrease until we consciously go in the other direction, right?
And there can be an ease releasing it.
Right. But what happens for most of us is that as soon as we get a momentary ease, or even an ease that lasts a few hours or a few days, what we do is go right back to what we've always done and drive ourselves right back into the situation again. We don't remain in a state of non-resistance. We don't remain in a state of self-aware knowing. We go back to what's familiar to us, even though it's painful. Because it's familiar to us. And we don't know who we will be if we don't any longer identify with that. And in your case, what you're talking about is actual physical pain. So understand that the basis of resistance is fear. The reason you resist pain is because there's a fear that this will never end, or I will lose everything, or I will just kill myself. You know, there are all these things that happen when fear arises. But if you don't name the fear as anything but fear, right? In other words, you don't try to define it with the mind. You don't define fear as resistance. You don't define fear as something bad or negative. You don't even care to define it with the mind. It's just fear. I'm just here feeling this pain, quaking out of fear that this is the end for me. I am dying, right? It's like face that fear, that ultimate fear for the body. The ultimate fear of the body with pain is I am dying. Face it. Bring light, consciousness, being directly to it. And this is not an easy thing to do, right? Especially if your fear of dying and your fear of what's here for you is lasting for months or years. Again, what we're always doing here is we're not trying to find solutions. We're simply undermining identification with the body, mind, and world. That's as simply as I can put it. So whatever it is you're experiencing, and everyone in this room has something. Some, it's very difficult. right? Some it's a physical pain. But at the root of our suffering is the fact that we identify with something that is going on in the body or in the mind or in our experience, which we take to be me. And it prevents us from seeing who we are, which is not related to body, mind, and world. And the difficult part of this is that once we come to this recognition, we know the only thing left to do is to chop that final connection between body, mind, and world and who I am. And this is terrifying, because we're actually saying, I am going to free myself as spirit now, completely. And I'm going to do it without needing to drop the body, but without even caring whether I drop the body or not. That if the body needs to be dropped in order to free me into the recognition of my own luminous being, into my own recognition of myself as the divine inspiration of life itself, then I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to give up this body. This is what Jesus did on the cross. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But he knew what he was doing. Absolute radical trust. And this is the meaning of the resurrection, is not that we're physically resurrected. It's that we come, if we're fortunate enough, to realize that we have always been this awareness, this consciousness, this being, this bliss. And that no matter what is present in the body, mind, or world, who we are as spirit is not affected. It's unaltered. This is what you were talking about, was this experience of life, of light itself. When you have a near-death experience and you come back, you begin to understand, oh, I am that. I am the fullness out of which, I am the light out of which all of this is appearing. I come from that, and I will return to that. Now your fear just disappears. Okay? So come to this fear. What is this fear? If your body melts into a puddle of pain right here in this moment, what are you afraid of? Why not?
I don't perceive fear.
Then what's the source of the resistance then? To things just being the way that they are, which for you in this moment we're all acknowledging is very difficult. Is the resistance there because you believe that somehow you are special and you shouldn't have to have a difficult body? Or is it because by having a difficult body, you don't realize that you are the light of the world? That you can't possibly be the light of the world if you have a difficult body? That you cannot be being consciousness bliss? And the proof of it is this body which is suffering? What's under there? You don't need to answer that question. I want you to just be with that question.
Okay, I can't answer it.
Okay. See, none of that is really there. These are just ways of challenging the perception that what you're experiencing is wrong, bad, not good, means something, says something about you. All of these perceptions have to be challenged. Your experience is what it is right now. Do you know that you exist? Keep coming to that. Do it now. Don't wait for your body to feel better. Don't put it off in this way. If you have a difficult mind, don't let your mind interfere as much as possible with your knowing that you exist. Even pain, suffering, difficulty, craziness can be used to understand that in this moment you fully know I am here. It may not be pleasant, but you know. Keep turning toward that knowledge and let the rest alone. Just leave it alone. Don't keep picking it up. That conversation about what it means to be in a lot of physical pain, a lot of emotional pain, a lot of mental pain. It just is what it is. Who or what knows that? And when I say unrelenting, I mean that you have to challenge this thought every time you catch it. Every time. While you're in waking consciousness. If you give this kind of identification with what the circumstances of your own experience are, if you give it the slightest, tiniest little bit of opening, the mind will turn it into a Grand Canyon, which you cannot get to the other side of. So you must be persistent with this inquiry. For you, go right to the absolute only thought there can be, which is the knowledge I exist. No matter what else is here, no matter how much pain is here, I exist and I know it. Many of you know that a few years ago I went through a lot of health problems and died a couple of times in the hospital in surgery and stuff like that. This practice works. When you come to this place where you know that it doesn't matter, I exist, and I know that I exist, then you can be hooked up to machines and people can be pounding on your chest and it doesn't matter. You know. I mean, you're suffering. There's no doubt about it. There's pain associated with it. You know, you're in the hospital for a long period of time. You have a near-death experience or two. All of this is going on. But what the masters and the teachers have always said is know that you exist, disidentify, stop identifying with everything else, and see what happens. This is radical trust. Is there a story, a perception, an understanding in your mind you think you have, which you are unwilling to let go of? Is it a story about your physical body, about your relationships? Are you unwilling to accept that what sucks in your life may in fact be your teacher? And I'm not telling you to embrace pain, struggle, and suffering. I'm telling you, don't resist what is here and remain with this knowledge, I exist. Persist through all of it and see what's on the other side.
You have to trust.
Yes.
When I had that bad accident, in the emergency room was where I had that bad experience. When I went to the doctor, patched me up, put me back together. I had a little picture of the Virgin Mary put on my, the operating room, and I told the doctor, I said, I trust God, I trust you, and I trust the Virgin Mary. I said, and I'm going to be okay. And he patched me up together, and here I am. But I knew it was, because I had my trust in him, and he was
Trust and faith, yes, at some point. And it's much easier, I promise you, it's much easier to see the value of what Eduardo is saying and what I'm saying. It's much easier to see this once you're on the other side of it. When you're in the position that Holly is in, where your pain is constant, and it's present now, this becomes infinitely more difficult, but it is still doable. Again, come to simplicity. The mind is going to force you, if you're in pain, toward complexity, to try to solve the problem. Go in counterintuitively. Go in the direction of simplicity. Simply know, whatever is happening, I exist, I am aware, and I know I'm aware.
Just to show a possibility, I actually had the experience when I was in excruciating pain because I was in my 50s and I had climbed a tree and I jumped out of it and I sprained my ankle and I had to walk out of the forest like that. And I remember I was lying in bed and the ankle was really hurting, but I was drawn into a state of bliss. So the bliss and the pain were existing side by side. And so it took away the power of the pain. And I was actually laughing. And I guess something happened to my mind where I just saw everything that I had just done was hilarious, and I was laughing, talking to someone on the phone, asking them to send a healing, and I could feel the bliss and the pain all at once, and so the pain didn't matter anymore. I guess I knew I wasn't the pain.
Did you know you weren't the bliss?
No.
Try that next time too.
Well, I don't know.
It's hard.
I don't know. It was a while ago.
No, that was just a rhetorical question.
That was a trick question.
You know me, I'm always going to drive whoever it is that's speaking, I'm always going to drive you toward the recognition that you exist and away from whatever side of the duality you're emphasizing at that moment. Or in this case, if you can see the duality side by side, that's fine. I still want you to skinny in between what's on each side of the duality. I want you to penetrate through. What knows? Who knows? Who experiences?
So can I ask, is the mind the projection on the screen in the movie theater? And we keep going up and trying to scratch the screen to say, I don't want that to happen in the movie. And no matter how much we're scratching, the movie's already been written, the actors have already done it, they've already acted it out.
It's even closer than that. It's looking at the screen and seeing that what's on the screen, and because there's fire on the screen, feeling burned.
Okay.
You don't even have to walk up to the screen. You just
Okay.
have to be watching what's on the screen and feeling like because of whatever's there's an impact.
Okay.
And never realizing that you are the screen itself. In other words, that without that screen, the movie's not possible. The movie's being projected on a screen. What is that screen? You are that screen, but that screen is not you. That screen is consciousness itself, awareness itself.
So the existence is the screen and the mind is the projection? From the movie
Consciousness
theater?
is the screen.
Consciousness is the screen.
That which says and knows, without a doubt, I exist, is consciousness. Now, consciousness has no qualities. It's just that aware knowing, I exist, right?
Okay.
That's the screen.
Okay.
That screen is eternal. It's the screen on which all of us are having the experience of usness. Okay?
Okay.
That's eternal. What you see on the screen is a projection of mind. It's not something outside of you. Everything that you experience on the screen, The whole movie is being projected by mind. The light, which is the, in the movie theater, the camera has a light and it's projecting the scene on the screen. That light is the heart of being. Right? So consciousness, which has no qualities, right, cannot be pointed to, it cannot be measured, it cannot, it simply is. We all know, I am aware, I am here, right? I exist. Everyone knows that. We know it so intimately that we just look past it, right? Right? That's the primal state, or the first state, let's say. The first recognition is I. This recognition moves from the heart of being as light itself out into the world through mind, which then generates everything that we see, creates everything that we do, everything that we are, every experience we have. So what we're doing in this process is saying, yeah, there's an image on the screen which is being sent by the light in the projector. But what happens if I turn the light off? This out here. So if this is meditation. So now I'm turning this off. What is here? The screen itself. The screen is always here. You can see the light of being. That's all. If the mind subsides. So the question, who am I, is or what am I, or am I aware? Am I aware that I'm aware? These kinds of questions, this kind of inquiry, is always about eliminating the, if you will, the concepts, the thoughts, the projections on the screen, so that we can begin to see the light, which then resolves itself into the natural state of being. Before thought, before mind, without all of that. And this frees us from whatever appears on the screen. Doesn't mean that the stuff on the screen doesn't still arise. Just means that we understand how it got there and what its nature is. And we're no longer moved by it. We no longer fear it. You say, oh, yeah, that's what it is. Okay, good.
Thank you.
And we hold, if you will, our position becomes not, like you said, going up to the screen and touching it. We don't need to go up to the screen and touch it. We already know that that's an illusion. So we just remain as the screen. And we just, literally, it does not make any difference. Whether it's a horror movie, a love story, right? a drama, a mystery, makes no difference. It's all just a movie. But we come to know this directly. By that I mean it's not a concept to us. It's a direct perception. This is when we feel the end of fear, the end of longing, the end of seeking. Comes when we no longer have any interest. We still participate, right? Because it's here, it's fun, why not? But we're not interested in making it mine. I don't need to own anything that's happening here.
So in an average day, we're all going through all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first wake up, we might feel okay, happy. Next minute, oh, we have a stomachache because we didn't have enough breakfast yet, and then we feel pain. And so, between the light and the projection, so we're not the movie reel with a message. The light is giving us the insight of what the existence is to know how to navigate it.
Why? What if you didn't navigate it? I don't go with that at all.
Okay,
It makes no difference.
Okay.
Remain as the light
Just stay the light.
and don't care.
Don't care if it's shining on the horror movie or the murder mystery or the
What does it matter?
Okay, just stay the light. Just be the light. That's all. Just do it, right?
Yes, do it now.
All right. Let's do it now.
But the attitude you have to take along the way is, I'm not interested really in what's showing up on the screen. I'm not all engaged in it.
Okay.
But secondarily, you can also say, what you think of me is none of my business. can also say, you can have whatever projections you want. Call me sinner, call me saint, whatever. I don't care. I'm not interested. That's just another movie. Your mind can project your movie here, but there's no interest in watching it. And similarly, there's no interest if there is some sort of projection that begins to happen on this side. There's no interest in watching that either. So if I look out here, I don't see 12 or 14, I don't know how many of you are. I don't see 12 or 14 individual beings. There's only the self. You are that. This is the foundation of what I'm talking about here. You are the self. You can try to distract this particular projection and screen with whatever your movie is, but I don't buy it anymore. You are the self. And there are going to be moments when you're going to force me to say, okay, your movie, okay, your movie has value to you, but I'm still going to say you are the self. Because this I know is true. You are not this limited body, mind, and the projection of it into the world. You are not. So, what you are is the self, being, consciousness, bliss. I cannot be convinced otherwise. You can. So stop it.
So we just get to go forth and shine. That's our goal.
Yeah, don't do anything. There's no goal.
There's no goal. That's so un-American.
Oh yes, it's un-American. I agree. It's unworldly.
Okay.
But this is the Christian admonition, because you guys, I know where the history you're coming out of. This is the admonition: be in the world and not of it. This is how to do it. There's nowhere in the Bible that it tells you how to live that way. This is how to live that way. Be in the world and not of it. Recognize yourself not even to be light. Recognize yourself to be nothing at all but that which is aware.
Okay.
And do nothing. Be aware. Let the world take care of itself. It's just a projection anyway.
Okay.
If there's something for you to do, once you recognize that you are aware, because there's no you, once there's a recognition of awareness itself, then what needs to get done gets done. But there isn't a you that does it. Because the you that you're referencing has stopped projecting onto the screen. There's just the screen, which is the self. The self is doing everything anyway, so what do I need to get involved for? You see? Yes, are you getting a feel for this?
So I think I'll have to watch the movie again.
Ah.
I'll have to listen to it and take notes.
Uh-huh, yeah. And then
Of
write a
your
book.
movie, of the movie that's
Yeah, I
being
know, and
taken
then
for
write a
you.
book, yeah.
And they get the computer out.
Publish it, yeah.
Oh.
Just don't involve me in it.
Oh. I think that's because we keep studying, it's got that door that says heaven and the one that says all about heaven. We keep going towards all about heaven instead of just jump into heaven.
Who's this we you're talking about?
Oh, I don't know. Our existence.
You see, every time the mind puts up any kind of a thought, I want you to say, what? Who? Why? I don't want you to wait. Become enamored of your own minds and your own story. You have to be willing to just, every time anything rises in the mind, challenge it. It doesn't exist. It's just a thought. I don't care how you do it. It's just a thought. I am aware that I'm aware. Who am I? Whatever's to your liking. Until you don't need that final thing. I don't want you to get involved in the complexity of mind. I want you to pick the one thing which is as simple and direct as it can possibly be that will help you undercut every single story, thought, and movie that you have.
And remind us again, what's the question to say? Is this in existence?
There is no question.
There's no question.
Just be here.
Just be here.
Take a breath. Be here. Rest. Destroy your mind completely. Are you still here? Do you know that you exist? Drop that thought. Good. Very good. Keep doing that. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urva Urgamiva Bandhinam Mrityor Mukshiyamamritawa Swaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jung Hung Om. Namaste.
Namaste.